I think some of the most fascinating characters in the account of the birth of Jesus were who we typically refer to as the wise men, or sometimes also kings or the magi from the east. Yet whether we realize it or not, most of our beliefs about these fascinating people come more from Christmas cards, nativity scenes, and Christmas plays than they actually do the Bible. And so they're said to be kings, and there were 3 of them, and they were riding on camels, and their names were Caspar, Balthazar, and Melchior. However, all we really know about these persons comes from Matthew chapter 2 and verses 1 and 2, which says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi, or wise men from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, 'Where is this one who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him.'" So what do we really know for sure? Well, they were wise men, or magi. I mean, that's the words that are used. They came from the east. They were looking for the future king of the Jews. And they were following a star to get there. That's really all we know. We don't really know who they were. We don't know how many they were. We don't know really what they were riding. We certainly don't know their names. So what do we know? And are there clues in the scriptures that may help us to understand the magi, the so-called wise men, better, who they might be, and therefore help us to better understand the importance of their presence shortly after the birth of Christ? And I would say yes, we do have clues. We have to dig a little bit to find the answers to really understand who these people were. And so we're going to do that. We're going to take a little bit of time this morning digging into Scripture for answers to the question, who really were the wise men, and why were they so significant to the story of the birth of Christ? I think you're going to find it fascinating. I think you're going to find it meaningful. And I think you'll find it reassuring or reaffirming in our own beliefs of Jesus as the Christ child, divine Son of the living God. Now we're going to begin, and I'm going to read the scriptures that I'm referring to, but if you want to follow along in your Bible, that might be good as well. We're going to begin by looking all the way back in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, chapter 2 and verse 10. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time setting the context for these verses, but in 586 BC, Judah, the southern part of the nation, of the former nation of ancient Israel, including the capital city of Jerusalem, was defeated by the Babylonian Empire under a king named Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Daniel was one of a large group of people who were hauled from their homeland back to Babylon, kind of over in the area where Iraq is today, to basically be servants. They hauled the best and the brightest and took them over to serve the empire of Babylon. So in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 10, Daniel is there kind of in the king's court in Babylon, and the king is trying to figure out the interpretation to a really strange dream that he had. And in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 10, it says, "The astrologers answered the king, 'There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer.'" Now the word astrologers in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 10 is the same word, sort of equivalent word, different language. Old Testament was written in ancient Hebrew, but equivalent of the word magi in Matthew chapter 2. So here we find the magi in Daniel chapter 2, and then in Daniel chapter 4, verses 7 and 9 are referred to again, almost 600 years before Jesus enters the scene as a baby. Now I want to urge some caution about what we typically think of when we hear the word astrologer or magician. Our understanding of those words probably are different than what they would have understood the magi to mean in their time. But I'm trying to trace the word magi to see how far back it goes to understand better the importance of their presence in the account of Jesus in Matthew chapter 2. I want to better find out who they are and why it was so important that they were there. So in Daniel's day, the Magi were high government officials, perhaps even some sort of religious leaders who had close relationships with and even great influence over the kings. And in fact, in Daniel chapter 5 and verse 11, it tells us that Daniel interprets this king for Nebuchadnezzar, that all of his wise followers could not, right? And therefore, the king makes Daniel the leader over the Magi, over these wise men that were serving the king. And Daniel now becomes their leader, which would have put him in a great position to share all of the Jewish prophecies about the future Messiah, including the details around the birth of Jesus. Now I want to come a little bit closer to the time of Jesus. So that was in Daniel. We see these guys that are the Magi existing 600 years before Jesus, very powerful people. In 470 BC, more than 100 years later, the Babylonian Empire has been defeated by another empire called the Medo-Persian Empire, and it is now the time of Esther. Many of you may remember the story of Esther, who saves her people from genocide at that time. Now, in chapter 1, verse 13 of the book of Esther, listen to these words. It says, "Since it was customary for the kings to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times." Well, guess what? These wise men are the Magi that existed back during the time of Daniel. And here they are in 470 BC, under a different empire, but still giving advice to the king. And in fact, historians from the Persian Empire, from that empire, recorded that one could not even become king without the approval of the Magi. So you could say that these guys are king makers. Now I want to come back down to the time of Jesus. The Roman Empire has taken the land that is formerly ancient Israel, the land of the Jewish people. Actually, Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire had it before the Romans. They got it from the Medo-Persians. I know there's a little bit of history here. But later, the Roman Empire, at the time of Jesus, they got control of what we now know as Israel, Syria, and Jordan, the Promised Land. The Magi still exist, but they're not in the Roman Empire. They're still over in the east, to the east of the Roman Empire, and what was known as the Parthian Empire, and that was the Roman Empire's bitter enemies. So the Roman Empire, you may not realize, to the east there was another empire called the Parthian Empire, and they were sort of like in hostility with the Roman Empire. So where is the area where Jesus was born? It's right at the edge of the Roman Empire, right near the Parthian Empire, Rome's foes. And the Magi come rolling into town. Now, if the Parthian Empire was going to attack the Roman Empire, where do you think it would be? It would be somewhere around the fringes of their territory. And this was right around the fringe of the Roman Empire's territory. So if you're King Herod, you're living in the area, of course, where Jesus was born. You've been appointed the governor of Judea, basically the overseer, the king, if you will. He was called king of the Jewish people. And this group of Magi, historical kingmakers from the east, a part of all the kings and the empires in the east, historically come rolling into town looking for a new king of the Jews, you begin to get very, very unsettled. And they wouldn't come into town by themselves. No, the Magi, they were powerful, they were wealthy, they were connected to the kings. They would have rolled into town with an entourage of servants and workers and animals and supplies. And most likely, they would not have been riding camels. Because of their extreme wealth and connection to the empires of the East, they wouldn't have had any problem making sure that there was enough water and connections to water sources and bringing enough along the way. And And they would have ridden on probably the finest horses from Asia. That's why I put the picture on the front of your this morning, because we all, we don't know for sure, but most likely they would have been riding on the finest horses that would have been available from where they came from. So when the Magi arrived, and these powerful and highly influential king-makers who came into town looking for a new king of the Jews, who know their history books, perhaps going all the way back to when Daniel was the leader of the Magi 600 years earlier. And they know that this is the part of the world in which he is supposed to be coming, and they see this incredible star in the sky. And they follow it thinking this is the time. And they roll into town with their entourage and their history and understanding. We might not have known who they were, but they knew. The people in Jerusalem, the people in the area there, in the Promised Land, in that area of Israel, would have known. And if you're Herod, you're shaking in your boots. Well, maybe your sandals. But here's something else to consider. When the Magi come rolling into town, Herod is old, and Caesar Augustus, the Roman emperor, is even older and barely hanging on to power. And a guy named Tiberius, who has been the commander-in-chief of the entire Roman armies, has just retired. And so now the Roman Empire does not have a commander-in-chief, and their emperor is elderly and barely hanging on to power. So if an empire was to attack the Roman Empire, they would come in at the fringe of the empire, which is right where King Herod was located. And when the Magi came into town, because they were powerful leaders, they probably also came into town with Persian cavalry, members of the armed forces of the empire to the east, not as a war party, but simply as protection to the Magi. Nevertheless, when Herod rolls back the royal curtains one morning and sees an entourage coming into town, led by a group of Magi and including armed forces from the military of the empire to the east, he would have freaked out. The kingmakers from the east are in town. They are looking for a new king of the Jews. Did I mention that Herod had a title that had been given to him by Emperor Caesar Augustus himself some years earlier? Caesar Augustus, he was not just the governor of Judea for the Roman Empire. Caesar Augustus had crowned Herod the king of the Jews. Herod had realized his dream and now was being threatened. That's why verse 3 of Matthew chapter 2 says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, literally agitated. Think of your washing machine when it gets out of balance. And all Jerusalem with him. And you want to know why the whole city was so upset? Because when Herod got upset, and when Herod felt threatened, bad things happened. As we are going to see next week, when Herod can't find Jesus and decides to try to solve the problem of taking Jesus out his way. So Herod then goes to all the top religious leaders and teachers of the day to find out where this Christ child is supposed to be born. And he even asks the Magi, oh, please come and tell me where he is when you find him so I can go and worship him too. Herod is not interested in worshiping Jesus. Jesus is a threat. He wants to kill Jesus. He's worked hard to become the king of the Jews, to become a major political figure in this part of the Roman Empire. And no baby is going to take that away. So the Magi go and they find Jesus and they worship and they give him these really expensive and precious gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Think about this. What these kingmakers have done is approve of the baby Jesus as king. They have put their stamp of approval on Jesus, that he is the one the ancient scriptures have predicted would one day come, the king of the Jews. Verse 12 then tells us that God warned them in a dream not to return to Herod, but to go home a different way, and so they did. Now, I've given you a lot of facts and figures, a lot of history this morning, as opposed to maybe bringing out as much specific application along the way, and I know that, but I wanted to uncover the clues of the history of the Magi, and here's why I believe understanding them for who they really were is so very important. If you are God and you want to announce the birth of a king like no other king who has ever been born, how do you do it? You do it by having the Magi, these very powerful and well-known kingmakers, come and be seen by all the people of Jerusalem. Remember, this is not in the middle of the night in a little stall of a barn. This was sometime later. And everybody probably saw what was going on as they came in to town, this little town of Bethlehem. And they come in and they find the baby and they put their official stamp of approval on Jesus as king as they give the gold and the frankincense and myrrh. And again, while some of this information may be new today, to us today, the people of Jesus' day, in that part of the world, near the edge of the empire, with the history of the Magi, would have had a pretty good idea of who these guys were. They knew the kind of power they had, and they knew that throughout the history of the empires of the East, when they approved of someone as king, that person was likely to become king. So in Bethlehem, Jesus is now in a house. He's no longer in this little stable. This is sometime later. Verse 11 of Matthew chapter 2 says, on coming to the house, talking about the Magi, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshipped him. And then they opened the treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. See, when the Magi showered Jesus with all of those precious and expensive gifts, it was like a coronation. Basically crowning Jesus as the future king for everyone around to see. And again, most likely in the middle of the day, everybody seeing them rolling into town. And indeed, through the actions of the Magi, God crowned his son as king, even as a baby. We think of the angels in the sky announcing the birth of Christ and how incredible and powerful that was. Well, I would contend the Magi coming in, presenting these gifts with their history and understanding. This was one more example of God publicly announcing to the world who Jesus was. This morning, we remember in this season of Christmas, in the town of Bethlehem, just over 2,000 years ago, that indeed, through the angel's proclamation, through the presence of the Magi, and so many other ways that God worked, that indeed the King of Kings and Lord of Lords was born. King of Kings and Lord of Lords now and forever. So I ask us this morning, have you accepted Jesus as your King? Have you received the forgiveness that he made possible when he came, lived, and died for your sins, and received him into your life in a personal way? If not, I pray that today might be that day, that you choose to say, wow, the signs, the miracles, the way God did this is so amazing, I cannot help but accept that Jesus truly is the Savior, the Christ child, and the Son of the living God. Amen. As we pray, I pray that this would be a moment for you to celebrate God's goodness in the way that he so powerfully announced to the world who Jesus was, and for you an opportunity for you to reaffirm or to affirm and receive the presence of Christ and the grace of God into your own lives. And we pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the confidence that we can have this morning. One more truth, one more way that you announce to the world and show that Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That Jesus was the Messiah who grew up and lived his life and gave his life. That anyone might receive your love into their lives, your forgiveness, your acceptance, your welcoming, and become your children now and forever. In this season of Christ's birth, God, we are so grateful that you sent Jesus as a baby, and so grateful that he ended up giving his life for us so that we might be in a relationship with you now and forever. Lord, may we be able to this day affirm, reaffirm, or receive your presence and grace into our lives. God, we are so grateful for your role, for your presence, for what you have made possible, and for what we are able to experience because the Christ child was born just over 2,000 years ago. In Jesus' name.